Okay, so let's start off with ethos. Ethos is the use of people/situations in order to prove the credibility or authority of a specific argument. Now what that really means is that you're using quotes and you're referencing those quotes to specific people in order to back up the credibility of your argument, right? So you're trying to make your, the academic writing stronger. You're trying to make your speech stronger by referencing outside sources. And I'm not just talking about quotes and information, because that's more into logos. What ethos really is it's referencing people, situations that are common and people know about, right? So let's get into the different uses of ethos. So the different uses are in traditional form, in writing. You normally use it as quote citations and general references. So if I were to say George Washington supported this specific argument, which I'm trying to make, and it was relevant to George Washington, it would be an important reference because it would show the reader that, well, it would back up your writing by giving it some sort of credibility outside of just your own, speaking. But that also gets into visual format, because when you're giving a speech, your speaking is way more important than in writing, because writing, a lot of your elaboration is going to be somewhat filler, while in visual format, everything you say sort of has a larger impact, right? So ethos also counts in a visual format because you're building the character of your speaker. So when you're building the character of your speaker, as you build it at least, if you speak confidently with authority, this also helps build credibility, right? So it reaches out to the audience. It helps them, make a connection with you. Why use ethos? It's used for a variety of reasons. I've already gone over most of them. When you're trying to prove that you're more credible, when you're trying to give yourself more authority, when you're trying to just generally back up your academic writing / academic, speaking, any form of literature, it'll back it up by referencing outside sources.
Pause the video. Take whatever time is necessary to answer this question in full. Then play the video in order to get my response.
Here I gave a Maya Angelou quote, and I asked to identify the ethos within the quote and explain the reasoning. The ethos within this quote lies not really in the quote, but it also lies just like generally, by citing Maya Angelou in any type of speech, it'll also give it a ton of credibility because she is a very famous writer. So it helps a lot. The next slide to go over it. So another point that I was trying to make is that by she explaining her thought process when she's making a stance. So when she says courage is the most important of all virtues, what does she actually mean by that? By explaining that, she's also kind of using ethos because she's backing up her argument. She's not just stating what she believes. She's also backing it up, which shows some sort of confidence, builds credibility. The historical documents, the Declaration of Independence, I don't think I need to really go over this that much. The important names are John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Hancock, the three big names. But it's also important to reference that there were different names listed under different delegations from each individual colony. So it made this document more about from the colonies to Great Britain than just from a group of people to Great Britain. It was really a uniting document of independence. Now let's go into logos. Logos is the use of factual / statistic evidence in order to persuade an audience into supporting a specific motion. So this is more about the quotes. We're talking more about the specific information. We're talking about graphs. We're talking about factual information that you can back up that comes from a legitimate source. It's not the source, but it is the information. In traditional literature, it is actual quotes and paraphrased informations, and it's also graphs, charts, and other statistical forms of graphics. In visual format, you might use presentations like the one here to show graphs. You might use bullet points to show information. That's a more visual format. And then the speaker might also relay data more effectively through talking about case studies, and etc. Why use logos? Again, it gives more authority to writing. It again backs up the credibility. It presents factual information to the reader in which they can actually digest and swallow and figure out by themselves, or at least with your help through elaboration, why your topic is specifically correct, why your argument makes sense. That's basically what logos is. It's building the logistics behind your argument.
Pause the video. Take whatever time is necessary to answer this question in full. Then play the video in order to get my response.
Here I gave a graph and I said present where are the forms of logos in this. I already went over this. Here. In the specific graph, it shows that, well, the graphs are the logos. So in this specific newspaper clip, the graphs are the logos, and this is what they represent. I've explained them in the slide. The title also represents a piece of logos because it shows factual information, relevant information that helps support the overall consensus of the newspaper article in that specific time period. This is the Brooklyn Daily Eagle right after the stock market crash. This is a very important historical document. And most historical documents will find locos used because it's normally factual information trying to build up behind an argument. This one's isn't maybe the strongest because it doesn't really build towards an argument, but it more supports the credibility of the newspaper entirely. So that's why I included it in here. All right, now let's talk about the appeals of pathos. Now, pathos is the use of an emotional plea in order to convince an audience of an argument, right? So this one's kind of different from locos and ethos. Locos and ethos kind of work together. Pathos is kind of on its own, section in literature. It's one of the most important parts. It's why theater works. It's why movies work. It's how you can figuratively connect yourself with the characters in the story and with what's going on in the story, because they're reaching out to you emotionally, because they're relaying to your common interest. In traditional literature, it's used in dialect, it's used in dialogue, it's pretty much everywhere. It's used in advertisement, it's used in, etc. It's used in a lot of different forms of literature, and it's one of the most important literary elements because it can reach out to the reader in that important way that locos and ethos really can't, because they're more informative. This is really where the emotion lies, and this is really where your elaboration needs to hit strong. This is really what drives your elaboration, what causes your passage to be different than every other passage that can, effectively quote factual information. Why use pathos? It brings out, a specific response from the reader in which we want. As I didn't mention before, I think I skipped over it. With visual, you're going to try to reach out. So again, confidence is another thing that can help reach out. That's maybe emotional to some extent. You may be, in a theatrical production, maybe crying or laughing or, common, symptoms of human emotion. Really help reach out to the reader in a very unique way that facts and information really can't. And that's really why you use pathos, so that you can relate to the reader. It's mainly that connection, to develop connection.
Pause the video. Take whatever time is necessary to answer this question in full. Then play the video in order to get my response.
So I gave this picture. It's obviously a World War II propaganda poster of a hand which represents Nazi Germany and another hand that represents the Japanese Empire trying to attack, American prosperity. I go over to the next one. It's very simple, but it does show how pathos can really, influence people into doing things that maybe aren't directly related. Like buying victory bonds is not directly related to what's going on in the poster. It's a little bit, dramatic. It's a little bit, extreme, but it is convincing, and it is, it does build that emotional connection pretty strongly, and that is what's important about pathos. That maybe it doesn't always relate, or maybe it doesn't always correlate, but as long as you can build that strong connection between the reader and the author, or at least between the reader and the writing, then you've successfully achieved pathos. The historical document I wanted to use is a photo of a former slave, Gordon. This was used during the Civil War by the Union Army. So Gordon was basically a slave who escaped the South to a Union base, and then the Union sent him back to the North. And they took photos of him while that entire process was going on. And these photos were used in, Union newspapers, across, the North, to help push war efforts, because this really showed the brutalities that were going on in the South, and it really proved the reason why they were fighting the war, especially when morale was down towards the middle of the war. So this was a very important, graphic, and it really does display one of the most excellent forms of pathos in American history. Next, I've provided a great example of a usage of ethos, pathos, and locos from a speaking coach. What I want you at home to do is to jot down some quick notes and techniques from the video you took away, and then answer the question I provided in the Padlet. That's on the Padlet. It's about a level 2, level 3 analysis question. It shouldn't be that hard to answer. It should only be in about a paragraph in length, but it should really help you understand the visual side of this presentation of ethos, pathos, and locos. Here's some information I've shown for you guys to study. I mentioned a quizzes which I got from another teacher. I thought it was very good. It offers level 1 / level 2 analysis questions in case you still kind of have trouble looking at a piece or looking at a document and defining where the ethos, pathos, and locos in the document is, or if there's any at all. So use that link if you want to practice that. I've also provided a typed up 1-page note / summary of this slideshow presentation. So that page will show you everything listed in the slideshow. All the notes on Ethos, Pathos, and Logos, and their appeals, and some examples to back it up. So that can be very helpful. Here's the video you're watching right now. So I hope you found this helpful. And here are my sources. So thank you for watching my presentation. If you like this, please share it with other students so you can help them with the appeals of Ethos, Pathos, and Logos. And yeah, just thanks for watching.